With the Dynasty mode in NCAA 14 being one of the most fan-favorited, it's no surprise it's gonna come back in College Football 25 and be better than ever with a ton of new content. That being said, that's the reason why I brought you a list today of the top 10 teams that you should use in Dynasty if you want a fun and challenging rebuild, and each of them have something special, so make sure you stick around for the whole entire video. That being said, let's get straight into it with the first entry on the list. Before I get started, however, I just want to say that this is in no order whatsoever. Each of these teams have something special, and it's really not fair to rank them, so I'm just giving you my top 10 overall. I have Kennesaw State as number 1 on this list because it's their first year in D1 FBS football, and they are definitely going to be in the game, but I think they're going to be about a 55 overall, probably the worst in the game, just because of how new they are and how they just got upgraded. So I think that this is going to be a great challenge for the hardcore players that can sit down and take 30 seasons to finish this dynasty out. I definitely think it's going to be well worth it when you win the national championship with them. But I thought it'd be a shame to not include them, seeing as they are going to be the lowest ranked, most likely, in the whole entire game. Next up, I have Indiana, and the next two are somewhat similar in how they're structured, but basically, Indiana has never really won anything, or at least in the last 20 years. They've always kind of been that middle of the road Big Ten team that plays Ohio State, Michigan, always loses, maybe gets a 10-2 year, one of those, but they've never done anything with their program. And I think it'd be fun to go in. You're in the Big Ten already. You're in the first or second biggest conference in the whole league. So you have these games to prove yourself, and you need to capitalize on them. And you have decent recruiting in Indiana. You're in the Midwest, so this is kind of a middle ground type of rebuild. It could happen. It could be very easy. I know other people like rebuilding Indiana for these reasons I just mentioned, so I had to put this on the list. I have Auburn next, and it's basically the same reasons I just mentioned, except with the SEC. And I would say this rebuild will be slightly easier than Indiana, just because recruiting in Alabama is easier than Indiana, and it's also the SEC. But you do get these chances once again against Georgia, I don't know a whole lot, and you definitely have a chance against Alabama to beat them. And once you do that, that's a statement, and that's how you're going to get recruits the following year. So this one's kind of like a one game every year you have to win. Maybe you can play Tennessee and they're decent, but whatever. It's really just you versus Alabama, but I think that'd be fun to do as a rebuild. Going back to hard rebuilds, we have Kent State next, and obviously this is on the list. They were the worst team in FBS last year. Obviously, Kennesaw State wasn't in FBS, but they went 1-11. They had a horrible roster. They're just horrible across the board. You can't get anyone to go to Kent State in Ohio, so it's hard to recruit. And it's also hard to prove yourself because you're in the MAC. That conference is basically terrible. You have no games to prove that you are actually good. Maybe you can schedule, 1 or 2 games against Ohio State if you're going crazy. But it's going to be a very, very hard uphill battle to get anywhere, even ranked in the top 25 with Kent State. So I'd say, obviously, this is going to be another hardcore type rebuild. But if you sink enough hours into it and know what you're doing, I think you could probably do it pretty easily. Vanderbilt is next, and it's kind of different than the ones I've mentioned so far. It's in the middle between Auburn, who's already kind of established themselves, and Kent State, because Vanderbilt is in the SEC. They have the potential to make these runs, but they go like 2-10 every year, and they consistently are bad. So this one is a chance for you to take control of this SEC program and run it up and maybe go undefeated, and it's not going to be that hard to get ranked. Once again, you have chances to prove yourself against good schools like Georgia. So this definitely is very possible. And Vanderbilt in real life is obviously probably going to go 3-9 this year. So I don't know. Maybe you could just try it out. This one is definitely different than the other 4 I've stated so far. The Sun Belt Conference is another horrible conference, but Appalachian State would actually be a fun rebuild because they have no history. They beat Michigan like 10 years ago and then got upgraded to FBS. They haven't done anything since then. They have a couple decent years. They go like 7-5, so they're not horrible. But I do think that this would be a fun rebuild. Simply, they're just in the mountains. Recruiting's not going to be impossible. I think they're in like West Virginia or something. so you can get recruits from around there. I think this would be a good school where you would find these hidden gems recruiting that turn into stars and help propel your program up so that it gets respect and gets more recruiting points down the line. So I definitely think this would be a fun rebuild. One more thing is also, I feel like you would get no NIL money because Appalachian State doesn't really have fans as far as I can tell, so that might be another hard issue that wasn't really in NCAA 14. Next on my list is Notre Dame, and before you start running to the comments to say that they're already rebuilt and obviously a great program, which they are, this one is a wild card, and I kind of made up like a game mode for this. I wanted to include it because why not? Basically, if you're Notre Dame, if you're rebuilding them, I want you to make the hardest schedule you can. Since they are independent, they are not forced to play a certain specific set of teams, so you can schedule the hardest teams like Ohio State and Alabama as your 12 games. And I really think this one's fun because you can schedule exactly your difficulty. You get to choose exactly who you play. If you want to play horrible teams and go 12-0 easily, that's up to you, but this one's kind of fun because you can do the top 1 through 12 teams, and if you sweep, then obviously you're the best team in the whole entire world. But it's also a lot different than a lot of other rebuilds because you already have the recruiting base to get star players. So I just wanted to throw this one out there because maybe some of you guys can find this useful, and maybe some of you guys will actually do this. The last 3 on these lists are kind of for more fun reasons. They're maybe not for the most serious rebuilders. With that being said, Tulane is kind of a mid-program that can take a step up. They went 11-1, so I'm giving them credit for that. But the main reason I put them on this list, I saw this online, they have great uniforms, and they probably will have great uniform customization in College Football 25. So if you're a sucker for going out there with the prettiest uniforms and beating the battle of uniforms against the other team, Tulane is a perfect school for you. But also, it's going to be a fun rebuild just because they have decent recruiting. They have a decent foundation already, but you can take that next step. And I feel like that's what a lot of people want. Maybe they don't want to, do the Kent State rebuilds, but they want the teams that are decent right now, but they can feel like they accomplished something when they actually, get a good record and maybe even win the national championship with them. I don't know how realistic the recruiting system is going to be for College Football 25, but if it's realistic, then Hawaii is going to be a fun and challenging rebuild because it's hard to get people to go to Hawaii, and not maybe because they think it's going to be a vacation 24/7, but it's because half your games you're going to have to ride in a plane for about 12 hours, which is draining physically and mentally, especially when you have to play a football game in less than maybe 12 or 24 hours once you arrive at your away game university. So I do think Hawaii would be fun, but also it's Hawaii and it's fun to play in Hawaii. Maybe you can imagine in your head you're at Hawaii or whatever, but you don't have to worry about bad weather. So this one's kind of just like a random one I wanted to throw in, but I definitely think a Hawaii rebuild would be fun. Finally, the last spot on this list is Boise State, and if you could tell the tone from the last one, you could probably guess why I chose Boise State. But it's also kind of, once again, it's going to be a fun rebuild. A lot of teams are going to be fun, but I just chose the ones that seem like they have an extra edge, and it's because Boise is another one of these kind of mid-tier programs that doesn't really play anyone, but you can change that. Maybe you play Colorado and Deion Sanders and all of them to boost your, stock in the top 25, but it has a blue field and it has nice uniforms and all that stuff. It probably will have good NIL. So I do think that Boise State will be a fun rebuild. But that being said, if you did make it this far, I thank you a ton. So please subscribe and like or something. And I will see you in the next one. See ya.